Okay, let's start.
The Vikings were Norse peoples from what is today Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. They weren't a unified nation, they were clans, chieftains, and sometimes mercenaries, bound together more by culture and language than by any single king. Starting around 793 AD, when they famously raided the monastery of Lindisfarne off the northeast coast of England, they began expanding outward. But here's what most people get wrong. The Vikings weren't just raiders. Yes, they raided, but they also traded, settled, intermarried, and, crucially, they adapted. When Vikings moved somewhere, they absorbed the local culture, language, and religion, sometimes within a generation. That adaptability is the secret ingredient. Keep it in mind. By the 9th and 10th centuries, Norse adventurers had settled Iceland, discovered Greenland, reached North America, established trade routes deep into Russia, and served as elite bodyguards, the Varangian Guard, for the Byzantine Emperor in Constantinople. Two of their most dramatic conquests, however, took place in England and southern Italy, and the story of each begins very differently.
The Danish invasions of England. The Great Heathen Army.
England in the 9th century was divided into several Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Northumbria in the north, Mercia in the Midlands, East Anglia in the east, and Wessex in the south. In 865 AD, something unprecedented happened. A massive Danish force, the sources call it the Great Heathen Army, landed in East Anglia. Unlike the hit-and-run raids of the past, this was an army of conquest. Historians believe it was led by the sons of the legendary Norse king Ragnar Lothbrok, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and Ivar the Boneless. Whether Ragnar was a real historical figure is debated, but his sons certainly were. In just a few years, this army swept through the English kingdoms with terrifying efficiency. In 866 AD, they captured York, then called Jorvik, and made it their base of operations. In 869 AD, they defeated and killed Edmund, king of East Anglia, later St. Edmund. Northumbria fell, Mercia was destabilized, only Wessex in the south held out, and it nearly fell too. In 878 AD, a Danish king named Guthrum launched a surprise winter attack on Wessex. The West Saxon king, Alfred, was caught completely off guard and was forced to flee into the marshes of Somerset, hiding at a place called Athelney. This is the moment in the legend where Alfred supposedly burned the cakes. Whether or not that's true, the historical reality is dramatic enough. The king of the last free English kingdom was a fugitive. But Alfred regrouped. He rallied his nobles and, in the spring of 878 AD, defeated Guthrum decisively at the Battle of Edington. The terms of peace, the Treaty of Wedmore, were remarkable. Guthrum agreed to convert to Christianity, with Alfred himself acting as his godfather. This established a formal boundary called the Danelaw, roughly the northern and eastern half of England, where Danish law and custom would govern. Viking England was now official. The Danelaw wasn't just a military arrangement, it was a cultural transformation. Hundreds of English place names today end in by, Thorpe, or Thwaite. Those are Norse words. Derby, Grimsby, Whitby, Scunthorpe. Viking DNA runs through the English landscape. Alfred's successors, particularly his son Edward the Elder and grandson Ethelstan, gradually pushed back and reclaimed the Danelaw. By 927 AD, Ethelstan was effectively the first king of all England. But the Viking story in England wasn't over. In 1013, Danish king Svein Folkbeard invaded England and was accepted as king by virtually the entire country. The Anglo-Saxon king Ethelred fled to Normandy. Svein died just weeks later, but his son Cnut returned, fought, and by 1016 became king of England. And here's the twist. Cnut was a brilliant ruler. He converted to Christianity, respected English law and institutions, married the English Queen Emma of Normandy, widow of Ethelred, and became one of England's most effective kings. He even ruled a North Sea empire, England, Denmark, and Norway simultaneously. Now we travel south, and here we need to meet a specific group of Vikings who went through the most dramatic transformation of all, the Normans. In 911 AD, a Viking chieftain named Rollo besieged Paris and threatened the Frankish kingdom so severely that the Frankish king Charles the Simple made an extraordinary deal. He granted Rollo a large territory in northern France, what became Normandy, in exchange for Rollo's oath of allegiance and his conversion to Christianity. Within 2 generations, Rollo's descendants had stopped speaking Norse and were speaking French. They adopted Frankish Christian customs, built castles, and developed into some of the most formidable knights in Europe. They called themselves Normans, from Northmen, Viking blood, French culture, Christian faith, and an insatiable appetite for land and adventure. The Norman adventure in southern Italy begins almost by accident, around 999 to 1000 AD. A group of Norman pilgrims traveling to the shrine of the Archangel Michael at Monte Gargano in southern Italy encountered a local Lombard leader named Mello of Bari, who was fighting against Byzantine Eastern Roman rule in the region. He asked the Normans for help. They went home, spread the word, apparently about both the religious pilgrimage and the opportunities for employment as mercenaries, and Normans began trickling into southern Italy. At this time, southern Italy was a patchwork of competing powers. The Byzantines controlled much of the heel and toe of the Italian boot. The Lombards held various principalities. The Saracens, Arab Berber Muslims, had controlled Sicily since the 9th century, and local city-states like Naples, Amalfi, and Gaeta maintained precarious independence. Into this chaos walked the Normans, initially as hired swords for whoever would pay them. The key family in this story is the Hauteville, a minor Norman noble family from a small village called Hauteville-la-Guichard in Normandy. The patriarch Tancred de Hauteville had at least 12 sons, possibly more, and simply not enough land for all of them. So his sons left for Italy. The eldest sons, William Ironarm and Drogo, arrived in Italy in the 1030s and immediately distinguished themselves in battle. William earned his nickname at the Battle of Olivento in 1041, where he reportedly killed the Byzantine commander in single combat. Slowly, the Hauteville brothers shifted from mercenaries to conquerors. They started seizing land for themselves. The most remarkable Hauteville was the sixth son, Robert, who arrived in Italy around 1047 with nothing but a horse, a few followers, and extraordinary cunning. His nickname said it all: Guiscard, the cunning, or the crafty. Robert spent years as a brigand in Calabria, raiding, building alliances, and slowly accumulating power. He married strategically, intimidated rivals, and proved himself a military genius. In 1059, Pope Nicholas II, in a politically brilliant but historically ironic move, formally recognized Robert Guiscard as Duke of Apulia, Calabria, and Sicily. There was just one problem. The Normans didn't actually control most of these territories yet. The Pope was essentially endorsing a future conquest. Robert was fine with that. Over the next 2 decades, Robert Guiscard drove the Byzantines out of their last Italian strongholds. In 1071, after a 3-year siege, he captured Bari, the last major Byzantine city in Italy. 700 years of Byzantine presence in southern Italy was over. He then turned his ambitions toward the Balkans, actually invading Byzantine Greece before his death in 1085. While Robert was conquering the Italian mainland, his younger brother Roger was doing something even more audacious, conquering Sicily from the Arabs. The Arab Emirate of Sicily had ruled the island since 827 AD and had made it one of the most prosperous and cosmopolitan places in the Mediterranean. Palermo was one of the largest cities in Europe, known for its libraries, gardens, and religious tolerance. Roger began his campaign in 1061 with a force that was, by any objective measure, absurdly small for such a task. He crossed the Strait of Messina with just a few hundred knights. The conquest took 30 years, until 1091. It was a grinding, brutal campaign of sieges, naval battles, and guerrilla warfare across mountains and valleys. But Roger I prevailed, and what he built was extraordinary. Rather than destroying the Arab-Muslim culture of Sicily, Roger largely preserved it. His court in Palermo employed Arab administrators, Greek Orthodox clergy, Latin Catholic bishops, and Norman knights simultaneously. The Royal Palace Chapel, the Cappella Palatina, features Byzantine mosaics, Arab honeycomb ceilings, muqarnas, and Norman arches all in one room. It is one of the most remarkable examples of multicultural governance in medieval history. Roger I's son, Roger II, took the synthesis even further. In 1130, he united all the Norman holdings, Sicily, Calabria, Apulia, and more, into the Kingdom of Sicily, one of the wealthiest and most sophisticated states in 12th century Europe. Roger II's court produced the Tabula Rogeriana, one of the most accurate world maps of the medieval period, created by the Arab geographer Muhammad al-Idrisi. The king spoke Arabic, kept a harem in the Arab fashion, and was described by contemporaries as seeming more like a Muslim king than a Christian one. The Holy Roman Emperor called him a half-heathen king. The Pope quarreled with him constantly, yet Roger II's kingdom was arguably the most advanced state in the Western world.